Welcome! Read the title of the video. Now let's talk about Dragon Ball The Breakers. I want to start things off by reviewing the company responsible for its creation, good old Dimps Corporation. In the year 2000, it was started by none other than Piston Takeshi Nishiyama. Don't know him? Well, he was the game director for the original Street Fighter and Fatal Fury, and when he resigned from working with SNK, he created Dimps with the vision of developing games for a variety of platforms, and was soon approached by big names like Bandai and Sega to develop games for their iconic brands like Digimon, Sonic, and One Piece. These games appeared on the Game Boy Advance, PlayStation, and WonderSwan Color, which I had never heard about before researching for this video. Then, in 2002, Dimps designed a project that would solidify their legacy: Dragon Ball Z Budokai. The game featured dozens of characters, rocking soundtracks, and unique interactions, both small and large, to capture the hearts of fans forever. Dimps moved on to turn out the rest of the Budokai series: Burst Limit, Dragon Ball Heroes, Xenoverse, and eventually Dragon Ball The Breakers. Don't forget the "the." Unlike their former titles, The Breakers wasn't designed to be a fighting game. Instead, Bandai's intent was to produce their very first asymmetric multiplayer experience. And with the funding in place, they hired the Dimps team to go right to work. They drew on inspiration from Dead by Daylight and Evolve, with the idea that The Breakers would be revolutionary and support games of 8 players. One player would take on the role of a raider, tasked with hunting down fresh victims, while the 7 others played as survivors, attempting to either elude their hunter or beat him so bad the Dragon Balls couldn't wish back their pride. Given the successes that Dimps was known for, it almost seemed inevitable that The Breakers would become a huge success. But because of a mixture of reasons, the game soon found itself in an early grave, and rather than being mourned by a dedicated fanbase, people spit in its open casket, disappointed by its quality. Think about this for a minute. The Breakers was marketed as a new Dragon Ball game that has never been done before. Hopes are high and the excitement is palpable. Then, an early game beta is announced that anyone can join in on. Thousands of players participated in the beta, getting their first glimpse of what to expect. It had flex raider queues, an open lobby with the Xenoverse island floating on the horizon, and a hide-and-seek experience that could terrify you because everyone was still learning the game. Cell and Frieza were available to play, with unique powers and methods to hunt survivors at their disposal. And while the survivors were limited in their options, this didn't stop them from jumping their opponent in a vicious cycle of the hunted become the hunters, especially if the raider wasn't careful. And after about a week or two, the beta closed with the full game to be released very soon. Not everyone was impressed, but people were willing to believe big changes would come in the future. Simple things like meeting their friends in the lobby, or being able to change what powers a raider had access to. Fast forward, and the full game was released, adding Majin Buu to the roster for free, who from start to finish had a different gameplay loop compared to that of Frieza or Cell. It was a big deal, but that required you to get past his first form, where you played as the empowered yet still extremely mortal man, Spopovich. And it didn't take long for people to realize that if you just harassed him as soon as possible, you could finish the game within a couple of minutes and go back to trying your luck in the raider queues. Because, let's be honest, almost everyone wanted to be the killer. But when 8 people are necessary for the game to even start, lots of them are going to begin feeling left out, which started a trend of toxic behaviors we'll discuss in a moment. On the other hand, while the survivors received new techniques and transformations, their access to new tactics multiplying by the patch, the raiders stayed static and unchanging. Other than becoming more skilled or knowledgeable, a raider's only method of advancement was to play games to earn more levels. But these would only grant small percentage increases that barely improved their skill set. Now about those toxic behaviors. While Dimps was wise enough not to include a chat system to avoid people flaming each other, they didn't consider their players would purposely sabotage themselves and others just to be bumped up in the raider queue. Many would simply attract the attention of the raider with a fresh sensu bean in their pocket, get downed immediately, then pop the bean, prompting the raider to knock them down again. The raider would take the free meal, and the player would be upped in the queue. Everyone else? They'd be down a teammate almost instantly, lessening their chances of completing the objective, while the raider was one step closer to perfection. Beating the raider quickly was also something that could get you nearer to becoming one yourself. Now, in this instance, the devs intended for people to beat up the raider. After all, combat is an integral part of Dragon Ball. I dare say that 100% of Dragon Ball is about the fights. But even the Z fighters didn't seem to carry around phones, let alone communicate in a chat outside the game to better coordinate how to effectively shut down Frieza before he could even pass first form. These kinds of games aren't made with the intention that its participants are in a call together or screen watching someone else play the game just because they saw their Twitch handle. That last part's just bad sportsmanship. Now, don't get me wrong, I also play asymmetric games in Discord, so I'm not trying to ride a high horse here. But I know that even when the developers consider direct third-party communication, they may need to balance in the favor of the minority. And they did. But it led to a horrific tightrope act, where Dimps tried to make the raider tougher without making the survivors too inadequate to fight back. Survivors were given more tools, and eventually, the raiders received a pushback mechanic so that they couldn't be stun locked so easily. And upon adding new raiders, Dimps made sure they were crafted with the idea that survivors would attempt to destroy them as soon as possible. Honestly, I thought these were great attempts to help balance things out, but these changes came much too late. The shop items were too expensive. Certain abilities were nerfed with very little warning. The flex queue was disabled because they needed more people to play Survivor just to keep things moving. Trunks would never shut up. On skill level matchups were unheard of. You would sometimes get a player AFK'd with a macro to keep them jumping so they didn't get kicked out, but still got participation credit while adding nothing to the main goal of, surviving. The community was in uproar. And much unlike when they showed up with stars in their eyes, the player base left their bad reviews and retracted their support en masse. Now the game is limping along, missing both its legs and an arm as it walks around on stilted nubs. That seemed harsh, didn't it? But if it wasn't obvious, I was also one of those hopeful players, left let down and jaded. I saw so much potential in a new concept for one of my favorite anime series growing up. I wished for something more than a fighting game. I wished for an experience that was more faithful to the suspense I felt watching and praying the bad guy wouldn't get his way. And I guess I got that, but not exactly like I wanted. I thought I made a wish on the Dragon Balls, but it turned out to be a monkey's paw instead. Oh, so this is where the game's arm went. Let's just say I'm glad that Spike Chunsoft, the creator of Tenkaichi, is developing Sparking Zero instead. Hopefully, it won't be ridden by microtransactions and balancing issues like the breakers. And I'm sure it won't take half an hour to get into a game. If you agree or disagree, I would love to hear what you think. But no matter what, I hope you have a great day and a great night. Dial Tone, out.